Good morning, grandkids. Today it's time for another chapter of Dorkly, the Young Wizard. And this is chapter 25. The king stood in front of his full-length mirror in his bedroom. He had a smile on his face while thinking about the new lady who may be in his life and about his two children's double wedding later today. At this point in time, he was a happy man. The future seemed bright. His manservant was picking out the best robes and sashes to wear on this day. I'm sorry. Miles was brushing off the shoulders of the beautiful white silk shirt with long gathered sleeves and laying it carefully on the bed. "Sire, here are two trousers, one in royal blue and one in dark brown velvet. Which would you prefer wearing for the wedding later on under your red and gold robe?" Conley turned and looked them over, imagining the whole outfit put together. Finally, he said, "I think I'd prefer the royal blue ones, Miles. Much more royal looking, don't you think?" he said with a chuckle. "Good choice, sire," Miles smiled. "I shall polish up these golden boots and your golden crown and shall return shortly." As he started out the door, he said, "Good timing, squire. I'm sure the king would enjoy refreshments." The squire entered and placed a tea service on a table beside a comfy chair in front of the bedroom fireplace and left. Conley pulled a robe on and sat down, a happy and contented man. He was thinking of Ina and the talk that they had recently. He had invited her to attend the wedding and to sit with himself at his table. He would be sending a chariot for her later on. His manservant returned, boots and crown in hand. Conley said, "Well, I'm ready to start getting dressed. It won't be long now." "No, sire, it won't," Miles said. "The children are in their rooms getting ready. Guests are just beginning to arrive, and guards have taken a chariot to collect your lady friend." Othello had invited Mandy to come to her bedroom in her spire where they could get dressed together and be attended to by Othello's mates. William and Dermis were in her sitting room having a drink. William was happy and trying to chat with Dermis, but Dermis was mostly his stern self and looking out the window. Dermis had been having uneasy feelings. Was he sure he was doing the right thing? Lately, it just wasn't feeling right. He would wake up at night sweating, and a vision of a book of dripping blood. What in the world was that about? He turned from the window and looked at William's smiling face. "Well, we shall soon become like brothers. I hope Dupree and I won't seem more like a couple of jackasses." And he gave a slight laugh, "though my brother has always been a much more outgoing person than I ever have." William looked at Dermis seriously. "You know, Dupree has seemed to me a dreamer, but lately has been showing more signs of maturity. You, on the other hand, I think you've always been too serious. You and I should go out to a club sometime. Have a few drinks, maybe drag Dupree out with us." He chuckled. "In fact, we should have done that before the wedding." "There'll be other times. Maybe I'll take you up on that. I need something to distract me. You're right about me. I've always been way too serious. Maybe that is the fate of a writer." And he turned and went back to the window. Mandy was getting her wedding gown put on, not used to being helped, and hoping that her pregnancy wouldn't show. She knew by now that it couldn't be Dermis's baby. and that she would have to go on with a pretense. But it would be borne too quickly, and what excuse could she give? She would have to find a personal birthing maid and discuss this with her, find out some kind of information to use to be able to keep this secret. The guests were seated. Conley had escorted Inez to his table and seated her, then went to stand at the lowest step up to his throne. He had on his most regal attire and his crown. He gave Inez a wink as he stood there waiting. Then the two young men came, and Dermis stood on his right, and William stood on his left. Then the two lovely brides walked up the aisle between all the guests to the foot of the throne and stood before the king. The king took the girls' hands one at a time and quietly spoke a blessing to each, then turned. He then descended the step to his table and sat down by Inez, giving her hand a squeeze. He looked at Dorkly, sitting at the other end of the table, with a serious, confused, and frightened look on his face. He wondered what was wrong, and knew he would have to speak with Dorkly after the ceremony. The priest of the kingdom parish entered from behind the throne and stepped down to the couples. He first looked at William and Othello and went through the ceremony. The asking of Othello, "Do you, Othello, take this man as your husband, be mated together forever, letting nothing end your bonding, staying faithful and true to him only?" "I do," she answered. "Do you, William, take this woman as your wife, to be mated together forever, letting nothing end your bonding, staying faithful and true to her only?" William looked deeply into Othello's beautiful eyes and said, "I do." The priest said, "I happily proclaim you are husband and wife, joined together as one." The priest then looked up and said, "I present to you all Mr. and Mrs. William Farthington." He shook their hands after they had embraced, then turned his hand outward that they could go. They turned, smiling, and faced the room as the sound of clapping reached the ceiling. They then stepped down and went to the first table of the king and sat down on his left. Conley leaned over and kissed his daughter's cheek, his face beaming. The priest then looked to the other couple and smiled. "Do you, Mandy, take this man as your husband?" Mandy was shaking so hard, her bouquet of flowers was trembling. "To be mated together forever, letting nothing end your bonding, staying faithful and true to him only." Before Mandy could respond, a man who was standing just inside the castle doors started walking forward, saying, "I think not. You see, she belongs to me." And that, pointing to her stomach, as Mandy clasped her hands over her mouth, "is my child that she carries." Mandy fainted to the floor. And I shall hatefully leave this chapter right there, so you guys can think about that during the week. What is going to happen next week? See you all later, grandkids. Bye-bye.